Took my ration. Now the possessive werewolf girl claims my bedroll. That's why he hid his supplies so well, in a tiny crevice beneath a pile of frozen rocks outside his small shelter. No one, he thought, could find them. But this morning, when he stepped outside to check, the carefully stacked rations were gone. His heart sank. Whoever had taken them had done so quietly, leaving no trace. Ryan frowned, scanning the endless white landscape. Tracks in the snow were faint, too faint to follow easily. He muttered under his breath, "No one steals from me and gets away with it." He adjusted his thick gloves and pulled his scarf tighter over his face. The wind was sharp, cutting through even the heaviest layers. Ryan's eyes, trained from years of survival, caught something, a small figure stumbling in the distance, half covered by snow. Curious, he began to approach, careful to leave no footprints behind. As he drew closer, he realized the figure was human, or nearly so. But there was something different, something wild. The girl, barely older than a teenager, had long hair whipped by the wind, and her movements were quick and tense, almost animal-like. Her eyes glinted with intelligence, but there was an alertness there that suggested danger. Ryan hesitated. "Who are you?" he called softly. The girl froze, then spun around, her expression a mix of fear and challenge. I didn't mean to," she began, but her words froze as her gaze fell on him fully. She looked cold, starving, and exhausted, her clothes torn and wet with ice. Ryan's first instinct was suspicion. Anyone who could move like that in Glacier's storm had to be dangerous. But then he noticed her shivering violently. The storm was picking up again, and if she stayed out there, she wouldn't last the hour. "Come inside," he said, a little reluctantly. "You won't survive out here alone." The girl's eyes narrowed. "Inside your shelter?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp. "Yes," Ryan said. "I have fire and food, not much, but it will keep you alive." Her gaze flicked to the side, then back. "Your rations," she whispered. "I didn't take them." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You did. Someone did, and I tracked them here. Looks like you." Her ears twitched, and for a brief moment her features changed subtly, more animal, more alert. She froze, then shook her head. I'm not your enemy," she said. Ryan sighed. "Doesn't matter, you're cold and starving, come in." Reluctantly she followed. Her steps were careful, almost graceful, and yet tense, as if she might bolt at any second. Ryan led her into his small shelter, a domed structure made from insulated panels and old spacecraft parts. Inside, it smelled faintly of metal and heated air. A small fire burned in a containment unit, and the air was warmer, though still sharp. The girl's eyes widened as she stepped in. "It's warm," she said softly. "Sit by the fire," Ryan said, offering a thin blanket. "You need it." She hesitated, then sank to her knees. Ryan noticed how she curled into herself, trying to protect every inch of her body from the cold. Her hair glistened with frost, and her hands were red and raw from the wind. "Ration?" she asked, her voice low. Ryan shook his head. "Not yet. You need to warm up first. Food comes after that." She blinked, then nodded, her sharp features softening slightly. Ryan could see she was fragile now, vulnerable in a way that humans rarely allowed themselves to be. But he also noticed her eyes, alert, calculating, like she was studying everything he did. After a few minutes, Ryan retrieved a small pack of rations and placed it on the floor in front of her. "Eat, slowly. You've been out there a long time." She hesitated, then tore a piece and started eating, her movements quick and desperate. Ryan watched her, realizing that despite her wildness, she was still human. She might be different, but she needed the same things anyone did: warmth, food, and safety. Once she had eaten, Ryan offered his bedroll. "You'll need to sleep. It's only fair, you almost froze out there." The girl's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Your bedroll?" she asked, as if shocked by the suggestion. "Yes," Ryan said. "I'll survive on the floor, you need it more." For a moment she stared at him, then at the bedroll. Then with an odd possessive movement she pulled it closer to herself. "It's mine now," she said firmly. Ryan blinked. "Excuse me." It's mine, she repeated, curling herself into it. I need it. He shook his head, half laughing and half annoyed. You just met me and now you're claiming my bedroll. She looked up at him, eyes bright and challenging. I don't take things lightly, Ryan sighed. Fine, but don't expect me to just lie on the ice floor. The girl tilted her head, a small smirk forming. You'll manage, she said. Ryan couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and amusement. He had survived Glaciera for years alone. He had faced ice storms, predators, and the endless loneliness of the frozen plains. And now this strange, wild girl was going to share his bedroll. That night the wind howled outside, rattling the thin panels of the shelter. Ryan lay on the floor, watching her chest rise and fall in sleep. She was small, but there was a strength in her, even as she claimed his bedroll with a quiet, stubborn authority. In the morning, she was awake before him, stretching and moving with surprising agility. She looked at him with a mischievous glint. Your rations are gone again, she said casually. Ryan groaned. I just gave you some. I didn't take them, she said smoothly. Someone else must have. He narrowed his eyes. Right, sure. She shrugged as if it was no big deal and turned to gather snow for water. Ryan watched her, realizing that despite her strange behavior, she was skilled and resourceful. Her senses seemed sharper than normal humans, and her instincts had saved them from small dangers he hadn't even noticed yet. You know, he said, you could help with gathering food. We might survive better if we worked together. She paused, considering him carefully. We, you mean together? Yes, I don't trust you fully, but I can't survive the next storm alone, and neither can you. She looked at him, her eyes softening slightly. Fine. But the bedroll is still mine, Ryan sighed. We'll see about that. That day, they ventured out into the icy plains together. Ryan taught her how to identify edible roots and hidden water beneath the ice. She showed him how to detect predators using subtle movements and sounds. Their cooperation was awkward at first. She was possessive, stubborn, and often too quick. But it worked. They found small game and patches of frozen vegetables enough to last a few days. By nightfall, they returned to the shelter, exhausted but alive. The bond between them was forming slowly, a mix of trust, tension, and mutual respect. Ryan realized that Glaciera was harsher than he had imagined, and surviving alone might no longer be an option. The girl, still curled possessively in his bedroll, muttered softly as she drifted to sleep. You'll see, sharing isn't so bad for you. Ryan chuckled quietly, lying on the floor beside her. We'll see, he whispered. We'll see. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, two unlikely companions had begun a fragile, unpredictable partnership, one that would test their courage, their patience, and ultimately, their humanity. The day after the storm, the sun barely broke through Glaciera's pale gray sky. Snow stretched endlessly, glittering like crushed diamonds under the weak light. Ryan and the wild girl, Lyra, packed their small supplies and prepared to explore further. Their fragile partnership had survived one storm, but the world outside was relentless. You sure we should go this far? Ryan asked, eyeing a jagged ice ridge in the distance. It's risky. The wind can pick up in minutes. Lyra, already stepping forward, shook her head. We need to find better shelter and food. This plateau might hide something useful. Her confidence irritated Ryan, but he couldn't argue with results. She had sharp instincts, a sixth sense about hidden dangers and resources. He had learned to respect that. As they climbed the ridge, Ryan noticed how she moved, light, quick, almost feline in her grace. Her eyes scanned constantly, alert for movement or strange sounds. She was tense but focused. Ryan tried to keep up, his legs burning in the cold, but her energy seemed endless. At the top, the view was breathtaking. Valleys of ice stretched in every direction, broken only by jagged peaks. Ryan pointed to a small cluster of dark shapes in the distance. Trees of some kind, Lyra squinted. Frozen saplings, might hide water or small animals. Let's check it out. As they descended toward the cluster, the wind rose again. Ryan shivered under his layers, but Lyra seemed unfazed, her senses keeping her steady. They moved carefully, marking tracks in the snow so they could return. Near the saplings, Lyra crouched low, sniffing the air. "Small creatures live here," she said. "Rabbits, maybe fox-like things. Nothing dangerous but quick." Ryan nodded. He unpacked a small, foldable trap he had carried for months. With her guidance, they placed it in a hidden path where the creatures were likely to pass. Lyra's sharp ears twitched as they waited, catching the faintest sound of movement. Within minutes, the trap snapped. Ryan opened it to find a small creature, alive and unharmed but stunned. Lyra smiled faintly. "Good work, that's enough for a meal." Ryan nodded. "We'll release it after. For now, it keeps us alive." They gathered a few edible roots from beneath the snow, thanks to Lyra's keen senses. She had a way of finding life where he saw nothing but ice and frost. Ryan admired her skills silently. As they prepared their small meal, Ryan noticed her glance at the bedroll she had claimed the night before. "You sleep well in that?" he asked casually. Lyra shrugged, a small smirk forming. "Better than on the ice. Don't worry, I'll make sure it stays safe for both of us." Ryan chuckled. "We'll see about that." The journey continued. As they traveled, Ryan shared stories of his life before Glaciera, of distant Earth cities and bustling streets. Lyra listened, fascinated, asking questions about simple human things: ice cream, music, crowded parks. For someone so wild, she was curious about human culture, a trait that reminded Ryan of why humans survived: the hunger for knowledge, the desire to explore. In return, Lyra taught him tricks of survival unique to Glaciera: how to detect weak ice before stepping on it, how to catch rainwater from frozen clouds, how to read snow patterns to predict storms. Ryan realized that humans alone had survived for centuries through ingenuity, and Lyra's instincts enhanced that skill in ways he could never manage alone. By evening, they came across a shallow cave in the ridge's side. The wind howled outside and Ryan motioned toward it. This could be good for tonight: shelter, protection from the wind. Lyra sniffed the air and nodded. "Safe, but small, enough for now." Inside, Ryan set up a small fire. Lyra watched, then carefully adjusted some rocks to shield it from drafts. Together, they made a modest but effective protection from the cold. Ryan couldn't help but admire how quickly she learned and adapted. As night fell, Ryan unrolled the bedroll. Lyra jumped in before he could even protest. "It's mine tonight," she said. Ryan groaned, settling on the cave floor beside her. He had learned quickly: arguing was pointless. The girl was possessive, stubborn, and not afraid to claim what she wanted. He had survived alone for years, but he realized he didn't mind the company, even if it meant sleeping on the cold stone floor. The night was long. Outside, the wind shook the ridge and rattled loose ice. Inside, Ryan and Lyra talked quietly. She shared fragments of her life before Glaciera, though little about her family or why she was part werewolf. He didn't push. Some things were private and survival came first. "Why do you trust me?" Ryan asked after a long silence. Lyra looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. "I don't fully, but you didn't leave me out there to die. That counts for something." Ryan nodded. "I guess it does." In the morning, they awoke to a quieter world. Snow still covered everything, but the storm had passed. They packed their small supplies and prepared to move again. This time, their goal was farther: a frozen valley rumored to have hot springs, a rare resource on Glaciera. The journey was hard. The snow was deep, the wind biting, but their combined skills carried them forward. Ryan spotted signs of hidden water beneath the ice, and Lyra pointed out subtle cracks that might indicate caves below. They moved as a team, each learning from the other. At one point, Ryan slipped on a thin sheet of ice. Lyra caught him instinctively, her reflexes faster than he could have imagined. "Careful," she said, eyes sharp. "Glaciera doesn't forgive mistakes." He laughed despite the cold. "Noted." By late afternoon, they reached a narrow valley. Steam rose faintly from hidden fissures, a sign of geothermal activity. Ryan felt a surge of hope. Hot water could mean warmth, safety, and even edible plants that grew in such conditions. "This way," Lyra said, leading him carefully along the ridge. "Stay close. Ice can be thin near the steam." They descended step by step until the valley opened into a hidden pool of steaming water. The sight was magical. Ryan knelt, scooping water to drink. It was warm, surprisingly sweet and revitalizing. Lyra dipped her hands into it, closing her eyes as if tasting a piece of paradise. "We'll stay here tonight," Ryan said. "We can rest and I can repair some of the equipment." Lyra nodded, curling into her bedroll near the steam. Ryan worked quietly, fixing his small solar heater and adjusting traps for food. They were alone but not lonely. Their strange companionship had begun to feel natural. That night they shared the small meal of roots and the meat from the captured creature, cooking it carefully over the fire. Lyra was still possessive of the bedroll, but now it was accompanied by a subtle respect. She didn't push him away. Instead, she let him share the warmth in small, quiet ways. As they drifted off to sleep, Ryan reflected on the day. Glaciera was harsh, unforgiving, and relentless. But for the first time, he realized that survival didn't have to be lonely. With Lyra's instincts and his ingenuity, they could endure almost anything. Outside, snowflakes drifted gently in the cold air, settling silently on the ice. Inside the small shelter, two unlikely companions slept, their fragile trust growing stronger with each shared ration, each careful step, and each quiet moment of warmth. Tomorrow, the journey would continue. Glaciera held more challenges, and the strange bond between human and werewolf girl would be tested further. But for now, survival, cooperation, and the small comforts of friendship made even this frozen world feel a little less lonely. The morning sun barely touched the valley. A faint mist rose from the steaming pools, curling like ghosts in the cold air. Ryan and Lyra had planned to rest and explore, but the quiet was deceptive. Glaciera had a way of hiding danger in its stillness. Ryan packed their supplies while Lyra stretched, her sharp eyes scanning the edges of the valley. "I don't like this quiet," she muttered. "Storms often hide behind silence." He nodded. "Agreed. Let's keep moving. The more we explore, the more resources we can find." They set off cautiously along the narrow paths winding through the frozen rocks. Ryan noticed cracks in the ice, faint but distinct. "Watch your step," he warned. "Some of these might lead down into hidden caves." Lyra's senses were already alert. She sniffed the air and twitched her ears. "Not all caves are safe," she said. "Some are natural traps, but others might hide food or shelter." Their journey was slow, careful. Every step required attention. Ryan had learned to trust her instincts. She saw what he could not. Even her small quirks, like tilting her head to catch faint sounds, saved them from several potential missteps. As the day wore on, dark clouds rolled in from the north. The wind rose sharply, carrying sharp ice shards that stung any exposed skin. Ryan and Lyra pressed on, but soon it became clear that a blizzard was approaching. "We need shelter, now," Ryan said, scanning the rocky slopes. "There." He pointed to a dark opening near the base of a small cliff. It looked like a cave. They hurried toward it, the wind whipping against their faces. Lyra led the way, moving quickly, almost like she was part of the storm itself. They ducked inside just as the blizzard hit, a wall of white that screamed against the cliffside. Inside the cave, the air was cold but bearable. Ryan set up their small fire while Lyra explored the shallow tunnels. "It's bigger than I thought," she called back. "There's space and maybe water." As the storm raged outside, they settled down. Ryan unrolled the bedroll, and as expected, Lyra claimed it immediately. "It's mine tonight," she said with a sly grin. Ryan groaned. "Every night, I can survive the cold on the floor, you know," she smirked. "You will, don't complain, it's part of surviving with me." Hours passed. They shared a small meal of frozen roots and some preserved meat. Ryan noticed that Lyra was unusually quiet, almost tense. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied quickly. "Just listening. The wind hides sounds, but I can hear them." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Sounds? What kind?" "Movement," she said, her ears twitching. "Something is nearby, not humans, not animals, something else." Ryan felt a chill. Glaciera was full of unknowns, but he had rarely encountered anything that made him truly nervous. "Show me," he said. Lyra led him deeper into the cave, following subtle markings on the walls and faint vibrations under the floor. Finally, they came to a large chamber, partially hidden by ice. Embedded in the walls were strange, glowing crystals. They pulsed softly, casting a warm light that reflected off the ice. "What is this?" Ryan whispered, stepping closer. Lyra shook her head. "I don't know, but it feels alive, safe but powerful." Ryan examined the crystals. They seemed to generate heat, enough to melt the ice around them. If used properly, they could provide warmth and perhaps even energy for food preparation. But there was a risk. They didn't know how stable the crystals were. "We can't take them out," Lyra said. "But maybe we can use them here." Ryan nodded. "Agreed. Let's set up a small camp. If the crystals stay stable, we can survive the storm." As they worked, the wind outside intensified. Snow battered the cave entrance and ice trembled along the walls. For hours they arranged rocks and ice blocks to channel the heat from the crystals. Lyra's instincts guided the placement. Ryan handled the tools and fire. Slowly, the chamber warmed. By evening, the cave was comfortable. They were safe for now. But safety was temporary on Glaciera. Lyra curled into the bedroll, her sharp gaze softening slightly. "You've learned quickly," she said. "Not many humans adapt this fast." Ryan smiled faintly. "I've survived a long time. I've had to." "Still," she said, "I expected you to freeze or get lost by now. You're different," Ryan chuckled. "I can say the same about you. You're unusual but useful." Lyra smirked. "I like being useful." The night passed with the storm howling outside, but the crystal's warmth kept them safe. For a moment, the cave felt like a home, not just a shelter. The next morning, however, brought a new challenge. When they emerged from the cave, they found the snow had shifted dramatically. Paths they had marked were erased. Supplies had been buried, and the frozen valley looked completely different. "We can't follow the same route," Ryan said, scanning the landscape. "We need to find another way to the ridge. The storm changed everything." Lyra nodded. "Agreed, but we are close to the ice cliffs. If we climb, we might see a safe path." They started climbing carefully. The ice was slick, and the wind gusted unpredictably. At one point, a large slab of ice cracked above them, sending a shower of smaller shards down. Lyra reacted instantly, pushing Ryan to safety. "Thanks," he said, catching his breath. She smiled faintly. "I told you survival is my specialty." As they reached the top of the ridge, Ryan spotted movement in the distance. Strange, shadowy shapes moving along the frozen plains. Not animals, something taller, more deliberate. "Predators?" he whispered. Lyra shook her head. "No, not predators, explorers or scavengers. Could be aliens, could be other humans. Either way, we need to hide." They ducked behind a snowdrift, holding their breath. The figures passed without noticing them. When the danger had passed, they continued, but both knew the world of Glaciera was more dangerous than ever. By evening, they reached a smaller cave near a hot spring. They decided to set up camp, using the remaining crystals and the hot water to cook and warm themselves. Ryan repaired the solar heater, while Lyra adjusted the crystals for maximum heat. As night fell, they shared another quiet meal. Ryan noticed Lyra's possessiveness over the bedroll was softer now. She no longer shoved him away completely but allowed him small spaces. "You've changed," he said. "Not just me, but everything. You're calmer." Lyra tilted her head. "I'm learning. This world forces you to change, adapt or die," Ryan nodded. "And humans, we adapt better than most." Lyra glanced at him. "Maybe you're right. Maybe that's why we're still alive." They slept that night side by side in the warmth of the crystals, both exhausted but stronger for it. Glaciera had tested them, pushed them to the edge, and yet they had survived. Together they had turned a dangerous storm into an opportunity, finding warmth, shelter, and even food. Outside, the blizzard faded. Inside, two unlikely companions had faced the raw power of the planet and lived to see another day. For Ryan, survival had always been about skill. For Lyra, it was instinct. Together they were stronger, combining intelligence and intuition, courage and resourcefulness. The adventure was far from over. Glaciera held more secrets, more dangers. But for the first time, Ryan realized something important. With a companion like Lyra, survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about thriving, about turning challenges into opportunities. And as they drifted to sleep, the soft glow of the crystals lighting the cave, both understood a simple truth. They could survive anything, as long as they worked together. The morning light in the hidden cave glimmered softly over the crystals. Ryan stretched and rubbed his stiff muscles, feeling the warmth that had saved them through the blizzard. Beside him, Lyra was already awake, her sharp ears picking up even the faintest sounds from the valley outside. She twitched slightly, then glanced at him. "Morning," she said softly. Ryan smiled. "Morning, sleep well." Lyra curled slightly into the bedroll. "Better than ever, thanks to you and the crystals," he chuckled. "You're welcome, I think." He paused, realizing how strange it was to feel gratitude for someone he had initially seen as a wild, unpredictable nuisance. Somehow, that nuisance had become indispensable. After a simple breakfast of roots and hot water, they began planning the day. The storm had left debris across the valley, and the path to their goal, the high plateau with rumored hot springs, was uncertain. But Ryan was confident. "We can make it," he said, studying the terrain. "We just have to take it slow." Lyra nodded, her instincts already scanning the icy slopes. "I'll scout ahead, you watch the lower path." They moved carefully. The valley was alive with subtle threats, ice cracks, hidden crevices, and patches of weak snow. Lyra's senses proved invaluable. She could detect subtle vibrations that Ryan would never have noticed. His tools and clever thinking complemented her instincts, creating a rhythm that made them nearly unstoppable. As they climbed, they reached a narrow ice bridge over a deep chasm. Ryan tested it first, probing the ice with his pole. Lyra followed closely, watching him carefully. "Careful, the middle looks thin," she warned. Ryan nodded. "Got it." He moved slowly, redistributing his weight, and crossed safely. Lyra followed, her balance perfect, even on the narrow, slippery ice. Once across, they both exhaled in relief. "See," Ryan said, smiling, "teamwork works." Lyra smirked. For now. Hours passed as they climbed higher. Finally, they reached the plateau. Before them spread a small oasis, a cluster of steaming pools surrounded by geothermal vents. The air was warm and breathable, even in the harsh glaciarin cold. Patches of green showed life. Plants had survived in this rare pocket of warmth. "This is incredible," Ryan whispered, awe in his voice. "We can survive here." Lyra's eyes sparkled. "And thrive. There's water, plants, maybe even small animals. We could settle here if we wanted." They spent the afternoon exploring, gathering edible plants and testing the pools. Ryan carefully measured the water temperature and checked the geothermal heat for safety. Lyra, ever curious, investigated the small rock formations nearby, sniffing for hidden life and assessing threats. As the sun began to set, they returned to the largest pool. Lyra curled into her bedroll near the warmth of the steaming water. "You're welcome to join me," she said. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You mean share?" She nodded. "If you want, we're partners now, aren't we?" He smiled faintly. "Partners, yes, but don't get too comfortable. You still owe me the bedroll negotiations." Lyra laughed softly. "Fair enough." That night, as the stars twinkled above the plateau, they sat by the geothermal pool. The warmth radiated through the cold air, steam rising like smoke from a hidden fire. For a moment, Glaciera felt less like a frozen prison and more like a home. "I never thought I'd say this," Ryan said, breaking the silence, "but having you around makes surviving easier." Lyra tilted her head, smirking. "You mean enjoyable," he shrugged. "Maybe. You've got instincts, smarts, and a knack for claiming what isn't yours." She nudged him playfully. "Someone has to keep you humble," Ryan laughed, a sound that seemed strange after so many solitary years. He realized that companionship didn't just make survival possible, it made life meaningful. Humans were resilient because they adapted, and they thrived when they worked together. With Lyra, he had experienced both. The next day, they decided to explore the plateau further. While gathering water and small edible plants, Ryan noticed faint tracks leading away from the geothermal pools. He studied them carefully. "Looks like small animals," he said. "Fox-like creatures, could be a food source." Lyra sniffed the air. "Yes. And maybe a place to hide from predators. We can follow them carefully." They tracked the creatures to a small cluster of caves hidden behind rock formations. The caves were dry, safe, and surprisingly spacious. Ryan examined them thoroughly, imagining how they could build a semi-permanent base here. Lyra's eyes scanned for danger, but she smiled faintly at his enthusiasm. "This could be our new home," she said softly. "We just need to make it safe." Ryan nodded. "Exactly. And with the crystals from before, we can heat it and keep it warm." They worked for hours, clearing small rocks and arranging the crystals for maximum efficiency. By evening, their small base was functional. The crystals warmed the main chamber, and the geothermal heat kept a small pool of water liquid even as snow fell outside. Ryan glanced at Lyra. "Not bad for our first full settlement," she smirked. "Not bad at all, but don't think this means I'm giving up my bedroll." He laughed. "I wouldn't dream of it." That night, for the first time in months, they slept comfortably. Lyra still claimed most of the bedroll, but she allowed him enough space to rest fully. The warmth of the crystals and the hot spring made the cave feel like home. Over the next few days, they settled into a routine. Ryan taught Lyra how to make simple traps and tools, while she showed him how to detect dangers in the ice and snow. Together, they harvested plants, small animals, and water. Life was not easy, but it was possible. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the icy peaks, Lyra turned to Ryan. "You know, I didn't think humans could be this clever. You adapt so quickly. And you care. You're not like others I've met." Ryan smiled faintly. "Humans survive because we learn, because we care. And we adapt. You're proof of that too. You've survived alone for a long time. You've adapted in ways I could never imagine." Lyra's eyes softened. "Maybe that's why we're still alive, together." He nodded. "Together." By the end of the week, their small base was thriving. The geothermal pools kept them warm. The crystals provided energy. Small animals and plants ensured they had food, and most importantly, they had each other. Ryan realized something important. Survival on Glaciera was not just about skill or instinct. It was about cooperation, trust, and ingenuity. Humans could endure anything, but they could thrive when working with others. Lyra had been wild and possessive, but now she was a partner, a friend, and perhaps even family. That night, as the stars shone brightly over the plateau, Lyra curled into the bedroll, nudging him gently. "You'll sleep here tonight," she said. Ryan chuckled. Finally, a fair compromise. They laughed quietly, their voices echoing softly in the warm cave. Outside, Glaciera was cold, harsh, and unforgiving. Inside, two unlikely companions had created warmth, safety, and hope. And as they drifted to sleep, side by side in the soft glow of the crystals, Ryan knew that whatever challenges Glaciera could throw at them, they would face them together. Humans survived not just through strength or cunning, but through connection. And in Lyra, he had found both survival and companionship. The planet was vast and dangerous, but for the first time, it felt like home. And in that frozen, alien world, Two unlikely friends had discovered a truth as old as humanity itself. When humans work together, adapt, and care for one another, nothing, not even the harshest world, can defeat them. Glaciera was their challenge. But together, Ryan and Lyra were unstoppable.